What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I wanted to hop on here real quick, give some quick thoughts on the Steelers' Day 3 NFL Draft Haul. Going to kind of go over some of my brief thoughts, scouting notes on a couple of these players. And then at the end of the video, I'm just going to kind of give a generalized kind of grade for how I thought the Steelers did throughout the process. They ended up picking, I think, 7 players. We'll talk about, my grade for them, even though I think probably the best process for that is to wait, 2 to 3 years before you can adequately grade a draft haul. But this is more so just like my grade based on like how I viewed these players coming in, how I viewed the team needs coming in, and just what I felt like coming out of the draft in terms of, how the roster's constructed, what they look like, if they improved, all that stuff. So we'll talk about kind of my rationale, my reasoning behind all of that. I do want to thank you guys so much for all the support, all the new subs, support on the content's been awesome. It's been a very long weekend. I haven't gotten much sleep, but it's definitely rewarding when I'm able to get on here. I've had a lot of fun, talking ball and stuff like that. So I appreciate you guys for that. So let's talk a little bit about these players that they picked up on day 3, man. So first selection, they ended up picking another offensive lineman. They went with Mason McCormick from South Dakota State. He was a guy that I watched about 3 games, I think, on. I actually didn't get to him till really, really late in the process. I knew that he was a combine riser. I had heard his name from some really, valuable draft insight folks that told me I needed to watch him. So went back and watched his tape. The first game I actually watched was him against Christian Boyd. He was another guy that the Steelers had in for a top 30 that they were showing interest in. And I felt like he won that matchup. So it was good to see him go up against some NFL competition and play well. Of course, when you're watching, these FCS or smaller school guys, they don't always get the chance to play up against the same caliber athlete that they are. So I try to value those type of matchups if I can find, the tape for them. But I think the things that stick out with McCormick, man, he tested like an absolute freak. I think he had like a 9.9 relative athletic score. You just look at the measurables. He's 6'4", 310 pounds. He's got good arm length. You look at the 40-yard dash. He ran it just over 5 seconds. I think 5.08. Good numbers in the 3-cone, the short shuttle. He jumped 35 and a half inches for a dude that is 310 pounds. It's pretty nutty, man. But I think when you cut on the tape, you can really see pretty easily why the Steelers were so infatuated with him just because of the scheme fit. I just think right away, like you see this dude be able to get off the ball. He has good initial burst. That first, second step off the ball is really good. He can execute reach blocks. He can get to his landmarks. Make sure he gets to the hat to the play side. And then another thing I really like about him is when I'm watching like small school guys or, FCS level competition and you're an NFL draft prospect, I want to see you dominate. Like you're way more athletic, you're way bigger, stronger. I need to see you dominate. And that's something that I saw with McCormick's game. He was consistently getting guys on the turf. You saw that nasty play demeanor. He was executing blocks in terms of, finishing. That's the type of stuff that I like. There was just a lot of stuff, especially in the run game, that I felt like he was really dominant. Anytime they were running behind him, I felt like there was chunks, kind of getting gained on the ground. I think there are some games that I want to go back and watch if I could find some more tape of him just against some good competition. And the games that I watched, there was several instances where I felt like he got beat at pass pro by less than NFL caliber competition, which is a little bit worrisome. He tested like an elite athlete. I think he's a very good athlete. I'm just not sure about how athletic he has been moving backwards. He seemed a lot more athletic in the run game than I felt like he was in pass pro. Just really when it came to like mirroring pass rushers, I felt like guys were able to kind of set him up pretty quick and then he didn't have the recovery ability to kind of slide and stay in front. So that is something that's going to probably have to be ironed out, and we'll know. I feel like pretty quick how close he is to kind of being able to play because we're about to see him make not just a jump in competition, but kind of a double jump. You get somebody that's playing at this level, but I think that there's a lot of stuff to build on just within his profile. He was somebody that landed like just outside of my top 100. Like if I would have probably scouted more players, he probably would have been around like the 120, 125 range. So this was good value for where they got him. I know some other people were even a little bit higher than I was on him. He gained a lot of steam, like I said, after blowing up the combine. I saw him at the Senior Bowl as well. He did take some snaps there. There are some things I think worth noting about his profile. He's played a ton of ball. I mean, he's an older prospect. I think he's going to be like 34 years old. He's played a lot of snaps and started a lot of games. But I think all of them have been at left guard, which is kind of interesting because normally when you get these kind of swing or, interior offensive linemen that are going to come in and be reserves, they need to be able to kind of play both sides at least adequately. You guys know my thoughts about moving players around a ton, but yeah, I'm just like looking here in the Athletic Dane's draft guide. It looks like he's played 70 games, 57 starts. All of them have been at left guard. He was a three-time team captain, which I guess that's pretty good. But yeah, that's kind of the stuff that I would want to see. Like, how does he look on the right side? I'm sure they're going to give him plenty of reps to kind of get himself acclimated over there. How quickly can he pick that up? How quickly can he adjust to the NFL level of competition? It doesn't sound like they have plans to like let him snap, but it may just be something to kind of practice in mini camps. There's nothing wrong with like giving him reps. I'm sure he'll probably be doing a lot of mental reps, physical reps on his own, just in terms of his preparation leading up to training camp and things like that. But McCormick was a guy that I think has starter potential in the league. They even mentioned, Tomlin and Khan mentioned that, James Daniels and Nate Herbig are both free agents after this season. So I think that that's, worth noting. McCormick can do some of the same things just in terms of, he's that's definitely something that's a common theme with all these offensive linemen that they drafted. I think Fautanu is a really good puller. I think Frazier can pull. McCormick can pull. Even like Roger Jones is something that I loved about his game coming out last year. Having the ability to have five pullers on the offensive line is pretty good. And you see some independent hand usage in pass pro. So it's not all bad. He likes to jump set guys, get his hands up, make that first meaningful contact and kind of dictate the rep, which is kind of a Pat Mayer thing. He likes to make pass pro pretty aggressive, and McCormick likes to play that way as well. But like I said, I think the biggest thing for me is what's the mirror ability going to look like in space, especially, and what's that going to look like against NFL caliber athletes? Because I did see him lose, a handful of reps. But a lot of experience. He definitely is going to come in right away. I feel like I'm going to push for that top kind of backup spot on the interior. And then, we'll see what happens next year. I'm still a proponent of extended James Daniels if they can. I just think that, he's still relatively young. I think he's a good player. I think you keep good players. They don't have a lot of money spent on the offensive line. He would be somebody that I would be extremely comfortable with given, another third contract. I guess this is for Daniels now. He came into the league as such a young pup. But he would be somebody I'd still want to keep. And then, Sam Malo, he's, getting up there in terms of, I think he's over 30 are going to be this year. So maybe he's a succession plan on the inside. But I mean, you can never have too many good offensive linemen. That's something we say like all throughout the season is we just don't have an excess of offensive linemen ever. Like no team ever feels good about their offensive line depth. The Steelers have actually been really lucky because they've been pretty healthy on the offensive line for several seasons now. Maybe that luck runs out and we end up having to see McCormick next year. I think ideally, like I said, those guys stay healthy. You can kind of develop McCormick. Hopefully we see him a good amount in the preseason, which I'm sure we will, and he develops and then we can hopefully see him develop into a starting caliber player sometime during his rookie contract. But overall, I like the pick. I just definitely think it shows the emphasis, continued in the trenches. And speaking of the trenches, they did spend another pick in the trenches in the 6th round. Their next pick was Logan Lee, defensive tackle or defensive end out of Iowa. Interior defensive lineman. I think, the things with Lee that kind of stick out for me, just in terms of like when I watched him, I watched like 2 games before the draft, but nothing too crazy. I just wanted to kind of get a really baseline feel for what he was as a player. Some of the things that I really like, there was some flashes of really good hand usage. I don't think he's extremely springy off the ball, but he is a kind of a gap shooting. He's a little bit undersized. I think he's only about 280, 281 pounds. He tested relatively well. I think a little over 9 relative athletic score per math bomb. Kentley Platt over there, check him out. But he's a fluid athlete. I think he shows a good amount of bend through contact. I was able to see him, win rushes with his hands. He would set up his pass rush moves, like the things that he really likes. He loves the chop rip. He loves the chop swim. So he is able to use his hands in succession and sequence moves together. I think that's always a good thing to see. He wasn't super productive, but I still think the flashes were obviously pretty intriguing. He does a good job, working laterally against zone. I did see him lock out several times against blockers, kind of using like a peek and shed to make run stops. And, he didn't look completely overwhelmed, in my opinion, against double teams. But I do think, there definitely was times in the 2 games and some of the clips that I've watched just since the draft's been over. I went back and watched some started to watch a third game. He did get moved off the ball a little bit in the run game. I think there is some issues with his lack of length. He does have a little bit of that tweener build, kind of similar to Liao in that. Um, he's only about 280 pounds, so he's going to be a little bit undersized, and he doesn't really have the arm length to consistently, disengage with guys. I didn't feel like he was shedding blocks at a really high level. The consistency thing I think with him is going to be interesting. I feel like he was one of those guys on Iowa that I kind of heard talked about as like, they were just kind of waiting on him to take the next step, and it just never really happened. It's not that the production was terrible. If you look at the advanced numbers, I think Pro Football Focus had him at like 2 sacks, like 20 hurries or 20 pressures or something like that. He did line up primarily in the B gap, some A gap stuff. But he's definitely a guy that I feel like can play. I think Carl Dunbar said they intended on playing him zero tech all the way to the 5, which I think makes sense. It's really just going to come down to how quickly can you get him off the ball? Can you get him to play consistently with a consistently quick first step? Because if he is going to be undersized, that's going to be a big part of his profile. If he's going to succeed at this level, you got to get off the ball really quick and really show off that explosiveness. And you see it from time to time. It's just not overly consistent, in my opinion. And then the other part of that is the run game stuff, because right now the Steelers still have Liao going into his third season. We really haven't really seen a ton from him. I don't think he's necessarily a lock to make the roster. To me, this kind of feels like a 2-dog, 1-bone situation, because in my opinion, if I was building out a roster, I wouldn't want 2 tweeners, because you got to think, if you're going to keep 6 or 7 defensive linemen, they typically at least keep 6. You don't want 2 tweeners, because then if somebody gets hurt, you end up having to play one of those guys on early downs, and usually that's not the spot where you want those kind of lighter tweener guys that don't hold up well against the run, because then once attrition starts setting in, maybe Cam gets hurt again, something like that. Rushing teams, the Baltimores of the world, they're going to know where they need to target. They're going to send double teams your way, and you're not going to be able to hold up in the trenches. But I think Lee's a fine rotational developmental piece. He's probably not somebody that I ever see being a starter. But in this draft, you guys heard me say this before in the weeks leading up to it. It just wasn't a deep draft, man, to be honest with you. There were more day 3 prospects that I did not expect to be there, just because, some prospects went earlier, some guys fell. But even then, man, there were prospects after the first 10 or 15 picks of the 4th round that I was really even excited about. So, I mean, at this point in the draft, you're just looking for traits, looking for guys that can fill specific roles and things like that. Once you get into the 5th, 6th, 7th round, these are just dart throws, man. You want to bet on some guys that you can maybe see and vision and playing a role on your team. And if they pan out, cool. If they don't, it is what it is. But I think Lee has a chance to make the roster. And maybe get a couple snaps. But he's most likely probably early in the season, if he makes it, going to be somebody that, has to kind of wait his turn to get his opportunity, get his shine. So, but I didn't hate the pick. I think on the consensus board, there were some people tweeting it out that he was at like 250. I think the consensus board can be a good thing, especially, but I just feel like once we get into day 3 and like the 5th round, I don't think that stuff matters as much, to be honest with you, just because, like I said, a shallow draft, teams' boards are all over the place. Like I said, I don't ever see Logan Lee as necessarily a starter, but do I think he could be a reserve or rotational piece? Yeah, in a perfect world. But my expectations are tempered. If they get something out of him, cool. If not, it is what it is. Their last pick was actually somebody that I didn't watch pre-draft. Ryan Watts, cornerback from Texas. I didn't actually watch him, but I actually did watch him in the summer because he popped for me. I can't remember what game I was watching, but he made a couple good plays. And I went back and watched another one of his games. And he was somebody that I wanted to keep an eye on during the season, and I just didn't. But it doesn't sound like his year was overwhelmingly great. I think the consensus, like I didn't see him on anybody else's draft radar or anything like that. I knew that some people had talked him up about being like a Steelers fit just with his build. You look at Ryan, I think you can immediately see why they would be attracted to him because of some of the other guys that they brought in at the position. Defensive back, he played corner at Texas. So he started his career at Ohio State, then went to Texas the last 2 years. He's played corner like I think a couple dozen games. But you just look at the measurables. At his pro day, he was 6'3", 213 pounds. He's got 34.5-inch arms. So this is a big, long, tall dude. The testing numbers were exceptional. 4.53 in the 40-yard dash. 266 in the flying 20. He jumped over 40 inches, broad jump over 11 at the pro day. So there's been a lot of good stuff in terms of the testing. I think he probably helped himself to where, he was probably going to be an undrafted guy, and then maybe propelled him into somebody taking a draft pick on him. And that ended up being the Steelers. They, I think, introduced him, if I understand. I didn't watch all of the press conference stuff. I'm probably gonna catch up on that this week. But I think they introduced him as like a defensive back, and he said that they told him they could see him at, some safety, maybe some slot corner, maybe with some outside versatility. I don't really think it's been one of those things where they have a perfect vision for what he's gonna do, but I think for me, when you look at him, just on tape, some of the things that were like popping out was just the length. This dude like has, I mean, the arms, they're dang near on the turf. But I think some of the stuff that I really like about him is the physicality that he brings to the position. There were multiple times where I felt like he was able to get involved in the run fit, able to run the alley, make strong tackles. I watched like a game and a half before I had to leave the house. And I just out of curiosity, he made like 5, 6 good tackles. And I felt like the form was really good. The technique was good. So I went and looked. Pro Football Focus only charted him with one missed tackle last year. It was like a 2% missed tackle rate. Anytime you're in single digits, it's good for a corner. And over the last 2 seasons at Texas, he's well under that 10% mark. So that's definitely good. And that's kind of the physicality, the build, the dense frame that you see with him. That's kind of why you think that he could probably make the positional switch to safety. Now, the reason why I think he's going to move there is because he's not overly fluid. I think like some of the matchups that I was watching, whenever he was going up against guys that were quicker than him or had more like prowess, I felt like he just didn't have that quick twitch to really mirror the movements of the receiver. So he didn't look like a natural corner to me. There's a lot of bail technique with him playing his back to the sideline. There was one game I was just looking at like his PBUs and stuff. There was one game where he did a good job not biting on a double move, getting back, leaning on the receiver, going up and for a pass breakup. The ball production really hasn't been there for him. He's another guy I think that like people were kind of waiting on to kind of break out. It just never really happened for him. But I do like the physicality. I like the tackling stuff. I think that there is a really good path for him to potentially be a pretty good special teams player, just based on, when you're looking at special teams guys on day 3, you like athletic guys, you like guys that are physical, who are not afraid to tackle. And I think that he can do that. I think he has the length to potentially like beat blocks and stuff like that. So that's probably like his path to the team. Let me see if Dane has anything on Ryan. I'm sure he's got him in the beast, but I do think like you look at the kid and you say like, okay, like if we're gonna take a a swing at somebody, I do remember him at the East West Shrine Bowl practices. I don't remember any specific play he made that stood out, but I do know that he worked at safety during that portion of the week. Looks like Dane doesn't really have anything like super interesting with him aside from the safety stuff. He was a safety coming out of high school too. So that's the other thing I think with him that, makes sense for a transition. My kind of take that I've been workshopping, and like I said, I've only watched about a game and a half since it ended, but my take that I'm workshopping is he may have the body type and the skill set to be a Trey Flowers type player. I'm not sure if you guys are like familiar with him, but he was a kind of Arkansas defensive back. He's floated around the league. I think he was with maybe the Vikings for a little bit, or the Seahawks, I think. And then he was at the Bengals. But the way the Bengals would use him was like he would only play about 10 snaps a game, but he would just come in passing situations, and they would say, okay, you're big, you're long, go guard the tight end. And he would just follow the tight end. That's what he did. Like bigger slot receivers, power slots and stuff. They would kind of use him as almost like a matchup type of guy. I kind of called him like a matchup equalizer potentially. I don't know that I've seen enough film from him to give much more of an opinion than what I've already given. And I can't say that he would necessarily thrive in that role. I'm just kind of workshopping that take is like, could I see this as a path for him to play on defense? Otherwise, you're probably looking at a guy that may be good enough to play in the box. I don't know how his range would look like. You like some of the speed stuff, but I'm not overly sure that he's fluid enough to necessarily play in the deep third. But, I'll probably have more opinions on that once I'm able to watch him a little bit more. And that kind of leads me to like my draft grade. I kind of settled like I was in between like a B plus. I think I'm going to settle on a B plus for the Steelers. just because I really like what Omar Khan did, man. I feel like he got a really good haul. I think that we were able to tell for sure that building the winning with the bigs mantra that they've been talking about is not just that's not just a cliche phrase or anything like that. They were putting their money where their mouth is with that. They went and invested in the offensive line. I'm huge on Fautanu. I think Frazier's going to be a solid starter. I think McCormick could be a potential starter with a little more seasoning. Like I said, we'll have a really good idea, I feel like, of what how ready he is after just like a couple preseason games. Or maybe if I'm able to get to camp, I'll probably be able to tell how far away he is from playing. But I like the additions that they got to the offensive line. They improved there significantly. And for somewhere that's been, pretty much a weakness, even though it's gotten better gradually over the last year or two, it's been a weakness for quite a while now. It's been nice to see them kind of attack that position. Overall, some of the other day three picks, like I said, don't really the 6th round picks. It really didn't matter who they picked to me because I felt like this was just a shallow draft. I mean, I think taking a shot on an athletic defensive back that could potentially play a scheme specific role is fine. I think Logan Lee's a fine player to potentially develop. We'll see if those guys make the roster, but I just don't really whatever they did with those wasn't really going to affect my grade just because of my overall feeling of the class. I mean, I watched at least 125 to 150 players. I think I had grades for over 125, but I watched in some capacity like over 150 players, and like there was just a lot of players outside my top 100 that I just did not see a even remote possibility for them to be like good players in the NFL or even solid players. So it was a shallow class. In terms of like the other day two picks, with Roman Wilson and Peyton Wilson. Peyton Wilson's an intriguing dart throw to me just because of the pure athleticism. Guys like that just don't have that type of straight line speed. I mean, he was consistently around the ball. I think he led the nation last year. I think I saw a stat that he led the nation with like 67 stops or something like that at the linebacker position. He was impactful. His tape is just like I said yesterday. It's just an odd projection with the scheme he's coming from, and then it's kind of unique, right? That they are bringing him as kind of I think insurance on if Cole Holcomb maybe isn't back early on in the season, but he's a guy that's really struggled to stay healthy. He has been healthy over the last 2 seasons. But man, he would be, if he could stay healthy and, I think if you can keep him clean, because that's the big, I feel like, detractor in his scouting report. If you can do that stuff, I feel like he can really help you. So, and then Roman Wilson, I'm gonna have a film room up on Roman, hopefully sometime, maybe tomorrow night, if not Monday for sure. I don't want to say for sure, but I need to get some sleep. But I've got a bunch of clips already cut up with him. I actually think like he's a really useful player, and I think some of the stuff that I feel he really well isn't getting talked about enough. And then I feel like some of the stuff that I feel like other people are saying that he does really well or doesn't do really well, I feel like I just disagree with. So I kind of view him differently. I feel like than maybe a lot of Steelers fans do, at least on my reaction, just from interacting with the Twitter folks over the past day or so. But I'm not going to get too in depth with that. But I am excited to get you guys kind of in the film room so we can kind of take a better look at his game. But I mean, the only reason they didn't get like an A for me, I acknowledge that they weren't going to be able to fill everything for me. But I just think I would get a little hypocritical if I gave them an A or gave them an A plus if I came into the draft cycle saying like my top two priorities, which you got to get a day one starter at center, which they did. I think Frazier's going to be the day one starter at the pivot, and he better be. If anyone else takes a snap week one, I will lose my mind. It better not happen. And I don't see it happening. But my other thing was I felt like they needed to get an outside receiver, and I don't think they did that. So I think Wilson's a useful player, but he's a slot receiver, and I think that you can do some different things with how you motion him, how you use him. But I still don't think that question's necessarily been answered. Now, if the Steelers go out and do what I think they're going to do, I think they're going to try to trade for a veteran wide receiver. Khan didn't exactly shut that down in his post draft press conference. Then I would probably even be willing to bump this up more because I would feel really a lot more comfortable with where the offense is at heading into week one. I just think if you're going out there right now and it's Pickens and Jefferson out wide and then Wilson in the slot, I don't know. I don't know that that's going to scare very many defensive coordinators or going to keep them up at night. And I understand the philosophy is going to be they're going to try to pound the ball. They're going to try to run the rock. And I get that. I just think, you got to really be four deep in receiver. And I'm just not really sure that they are right now. I feel like they still need to add a boundary guy. So that's kind of where I'm at. You guys be sure to grades in the comments. Like I said, I really appreciate the support. It's been fun chatting with you guys about the draft. Like I told y'all, man, this is my favorite time of the year, my favorite weekend of the year. I can't wait till next year. I felt like we did a lot of stuff, a lot of fun stuff this time around, and I was proud of what we were able to kind of pump out content wise. I've got some more stuff coming out for SteelersNow.com, so make sure y'all check that out. Y'all holler at me on Twitter. Make sure y'all like, subscribe, turn on notifications. I'm going to try to pump out some film room stuff. We're definitely going to do, like I said, Wilson in the next day or two. And then I'll try to get to some of the other players. And then if I have time, I'm going to try to start digging into some of the undrafted free agent guys. I know they've already announced 5 contracts. Beanie Bishop was one of them from West Virginia. I've seen a little bit of him, but maybe I'll do a separate kind of video like this on the undrafted free agents if there's enough interest from you guys to give you all my thoughts, provided I can actually find tape on these guys. So, but yeah, I'm very appreciative. Thank you guys so much for the support. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Make sure y'all, get some rest.